Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of mindfitpodcast. My name is Robert Aceves, and I'm here with Neil Babins. How you doing, Neil?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing great. I'm actually happy that things are reopening again. It's been kind of weird, but how was your weekend?
My weekend was really nice. I was Memorial Day, and I went up to Big Bear Lake with I met some friends up there, and got a different view, a different landscape, and went to the lake and did a really nice hike, and went shopping a little bit in the village. They're still practicing social distancing, but the shops are open, some of the restaurants are open, and it was really great to get out of the city, and it was really nice. A lot of people up there, surprisingly, for Memorial Day weekend. But apparently, the day after Memorial Day weekend, it's going to get dead. So,
Yeah,
it'll die.
Yeah, over here too. A lot of restaurants are reopening. I went to dinner last night for the first time to this restaurant, and it was really interesting because it was maybe at 20% capacity. So there's a lot of empty tables and everyone's wearing masks, and it was definitely an experience. It was nice to go out again, but I feel like it's going to be a long time before we actually go back to what we used to call normal, if we ever do. But it's it's a sign of hope that things are getting back to normal, I guess, somehow. The virus is still out there, so we still have to be careful and be safe. But it feels good to do that. So I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I heard that the stores are starting to open again. It's not just curbside anymore, that they're actually beginning to open, like clothing stores, retail stores, like the non-essential stores are starting to open up. I'm excited for it to start to happen. I don't know how accurate this is or not, but I have heard from people in Europe that some scientists have started to say that in certain countries that were under lockdown, it's become the problem has been flattened out, and that the contagion level has gone down, so that a person who has the virus will only give it to 0.4 people, basically, like 0.4, which is very low contagion level, which means that if someone was to go out, the chances that they'll infect somebody else is like 0.4. So they'll infect less than half of one person in a given cycle. So I don't know all the details of that, and I'm not a scientist, but that's what I heard. So I think it's getting better. And we just have to wait and see. I know people want to err on the side of caution. Some people do, but it looks like we're moving into a different stage. And I heard that theme parks are in stage 3. So Disneyland could open up soon. Who knows?
Yeah,
a little restrictions there.
Really excited about that.
I know. So am I. But I'm wondering about wearing a mask in 95-degree weather in Anaheim. I'm like, yeah. I will if they tell me to. But I'm going to seek out a lot of air conditioning on a day like that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, after all this pandemic stuff, there's been a few lessons that I think are important to learn. And today we're going to be talking about black and white thinking. This is a defense mechanism that we use sometimes to, get through life. Sometimes it's, either black or white, nothing in between. And that's not necessarily the best thing to do in life, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what do you have to say about that, Neil?
Black and white thinking, or absolutist thinking, is something that comes up a lot for me when I talk to clients. It also comes up a lot in life when you look around. It is known as a defense mechanism, and it's basically, the definition is, you can find this online, is the failure in a person's thinking to bring together the dichotomy of both positive and negative qualities of the self and others into a cohesive, realistic whole, and known as a common defense mechanism. So it's basically the inability to see the gray area in something, or what I call looking at a spectrum of two polar opposites. So when we talked about, for example, about COVID or about opening up, should we lock down, should we open up again? The truth, if there is a truth, an absolute truth, is probably somewhere in the middle, and it probably dances around from place to place somewhere in the middle. The truths or our objective realities are probably somewhere in the middle between two polar opposites, but we have a tendency as people to be absolutist. We tend to gravitate toward one side of thinking or the other side of thinking. And this dichotomy is pretty common, not just in like larger political issues or issues like a pandemic, but in personal life. I mean, a lot of people will ask me questions, for example, like, should I stay in this relationship or should I get out of it? And I might say to them, well, are those the only two choices? I mean, is there something you can do within the relationship that has you perhaps back off of it a little bit? Or should I continue dating this person, or should I just move on? I'm like, does it have to be one absolute choice or the other? It can be, but does it need to be? Are those the only two choices? Is there a gray area in the middle where you could sort of dance around a little bit and perhaps pull back a little, perhaps put some new boundaries, assert some new boundaries in the relationship, saying this is not something that I'm up for, or this doesn't work for me, or let's try to work on this, or, let's take a break for 2 weeks, we spend a lot of time together, let's spend a little less time and see how things go, that kind of thing. So, so I see that a lot, and I think it causes people a lot of stress. It adds to people's anxiety,
Totally.
Because you have to marry one group of thought or the other, and it's like it doesn't always make sense,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would give people a lot of freedom to understand that that's going on and catch themselves when they're doing it, and give you a lot of peace of mind to recognize that we do that with everything in life. Should I quit my job? Should I move? Should I make that phone call? And sometimes I get it. Some things have to have a concrete decision, but a lot of times there's a way to view, and I would love to see this in society too. I'd love to see this out there in social psychology. I'd love to see people be able to understand everything that's going on somewhere in the middle. You know what I mean? I don't mean in the middle politically. So, before people shoot a lot of emails our way, I don't mean that. I mean, just be able to take in everything on both sides, process it, and understand that the ultimate truth for everybody is probably somewhere in the middle, a lot of the time. So I think that would be a very helpful thing to consider. Love to see more of that.
Yeah. I have a little example about that. I think this might help to understand a little bit better. Back in 2001 or so, I don't know if you remember the tech crash in the stock market.
Yeah.
I actually had about $20,000 or $30,000 in there, and I lost like $20,000 in a few weeks, and it was a horrible crash. All the tech companies went down. It was a bubble, blah blah blah. And after that, I felt so bad. I thought, I should never touch the stock market again, and I didn't. And I regret that so much because, if I would have gone back into it, I mean, Amazon at that time was probably about $20 per share. Netflix was, barely starting, and it was like $10, $15 a share. Right now, I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen the stock market, but this shares are like over, I think Amazon is over $2,500 and Netflix is at 400 and something. So, I would have definitely made a lot of money if I would have gone back into it. And like you said, sometimes we get this failures in life or something that happens that really causes us pain. And we just, as a defense mechanism, we're like, okay, I'm going to stay away from that because this is not for me. I should not do it. But, if I would have been okay with failure at that time and being like, okay, this happened. Nobody can control the stock market. I mean, it's something that nobody knew was going to happen. And then just get back into it, and then do it again and keep investing, then that would have been better. Now, I learned my lesson from that. And, over the years, I've gotten over it and I've gone back into the stock market and I've made money. But I've also, there was a time when, I don't know if you remember MoviePass, but I was an investor in that, and I bought a lot of shares on that when it was at $2 or something. Then it went up to $38 at some point, and I had quite a bit of money, but I thought it was going to keep going up. I thought, MoviePass was going to be the next Netflix, and I ended up not selling some of it. I did sell some, so I made some money, but then I lost a lot of money again. And again, I was like, oh my God, I lost money, blah, blah, blah. And then I started to feel like I should not be in the stock market, blah, blah, blah. But then I went back into it. And then I started, again, making money again. And so from all those things now, I kind of understand how the stock market works more. I've learned my lessons, and I have made money now. And recently there was a crash with the whole pandemic. And then I started to, invest at that time and make money. And so now things are going back up, and I'm sure there's going to be another crash. They're predicting that one more coming, before it gets better. But, my point is, whenever you fail, doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Doesn't mean like, okay, that's it. I'm done with that. And that could be with relationships, like you said. It could be with, I've seen this a lot. A lot of people nowadays are starting YouTube channels, and they, make a video and they post it, and they don't get any views or very few, and they get this, this illusion, and they're like, okay, maybe this is not for me, and they stop doing it. And that's not how you get in anything in life. You have to continually to persist, to get better at whatever you do until you can make it happen. That's my take on that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people live their lives through rules that they've come up with based on those kinds of experiences you just said. They get they develop absolute ways of thinking based on like one event or one failure, and they say, I can't do anything right, or I can't do that right, or I'm not good at that, or and they sort of hold themselves back from ever trying again. Like you said, with the stock market, so a lot of people will avoid ever going there again. They'll take, it's like looking at the wall and seeing a small stain, and then seeing the entire wall is stained, because one little thing happened, or there's one little speck on the wall. You focus on that speck, you become fixated on that, and forever going forward, you avoid that wall, or you just think that wall is an unattractive wall or a failure. And people, oftentimes we don't even realize that we're doing this, that we make up our minds about things in an absolutist kind of a way, a black or white kind of a way, and we never do it again. We do that with dating, we do that with work, we do that with endeavors in life. I think I said last episode, we're talking about plumbing, and I said I'm not good at fixing things. I had that conclusion probably from some incident where I tried to fix something and it just didn't work, and I got frustrated. Just so happens there was a leak in my shower last week, a bad one, because I got a new shower head, a really nice one, and it was leaking badly. So I tried to put it back on, and that wasn't the solution. So I went through, on Amazon, I went through different kinds of tapes. It's not my forte, but I went through a bunch of different tapes that are leak sealant tapes. And I had to search a lot and try a few different ones until I found the one that a plumber would use, type thing. I ordered it, and I put it on, and the leak is gone. I actually fixed something. And for me, that was a big deal, because I had this absolutist way of thinking, oh, no, I got to call somebody. Because I can't do that. I would try maybe once or twice in a small way, and if it didn't work, I would just give up too easily, and then I would just say, okay, I got to call in a professional and have them do it. Sometimes I don't have time to fix it, but it was just tape, and it actually worked. So I'm like, it's fixed, and I don't have to call anybody, and all it took was a little bit of tape. So my point is that, just like you with the stock market, I would have made a decision, a black and white decision. I can't do this. I'm not good at this. It's not my forte. I can't even take on that endeavor. But if you actually sit down with it, and so mindfully sort of concentrate on, okay, what is the solution here? You'd be surprised at what you could actually do. I'm not saying you're going to become a professional or you're going to become an expert at it, but you could actually get through it or get it done if you wanted to, if you chose to. So I think that people limit themselves a lot. And all or nothing thinking they call it a negative thinking pattern. It's common in people with panic disorder, depression, anxiety-related issues, because we tend to have what's called a cognitive distortion. It's a skewed, distorted way of thinking about anything. And we put our thoughts into a certain categorical polarization, and they stay there, and that limits our life. It limits our freedom, limits our self-agency, and it tells us about the world. It has it gives us a lens that we look through. We don't even know we're doing that after a while. It just becomes the way things are, the way the world is, and hence the way our future is. And but really, if we challenged it a little bit, we'd find that there's a spectrum in between. There's a middle ground, and finding the middle ground, I think, will give people a lot of freedom,
Yeah. I think also it's really a thing that happens nowadays where I think I mentioned it last week that when we, because we go online in the internet and YouTube and all these different platforms that are out there, we tend to go for what we love, and we get more of that. We get everything that we love. And so society is becoming more separated because of it, because
Mm-hmm.
people become more one thing and more the other, and we're not exposed to things that are different from us, that are things that we were not into, but that we could possibly get into or learn about, that are different from us. And so we don't know what that's like back in the day, like for example, when we used to watch commercials, we would get all kinds of commercials. So we would see things that, oh my gosh, that looks interesting, that we'd never hear. Now, most of the commercials ads we get are things that we liked or had shown some interest in the past, and that's what one of the things that Amazon does nowadays is, and Google, it's when they see that you have some interest in something, they start giving you ads on that until you buy that thing, or buy more of those things or accessories for it, or blah blah blah. But the idea though is, if we could expose ourselves to things that are different from us, to open up, so that we're not limiting ourselves, like you said, to certain things, certain aspects of life, then maybe we can open up to other, possibilities. Like I said, if you start videos on YouTube and, the first one doesn't do so well, maybe the next one will do better. I've done thousands of videos by now for multiple channels that I have. And I tell you, maybe out of 100, there's 2 or 3 that do amazing, but then you still have to go through that process, to make those bad videos so you can get them out of your system and you learn from them. You learn from each thing that you do. Same with the stock market. I've bought so many stocks over the years, and some of them do amazing, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And so you try and you learn and you try to make your best guess and you learn about companies and you do your research. But at the end of the day, it's whatever happens in the society that's going to dictate what's going to happen in the stock market. And so you try to do your best, and that's okay. And if you fail, then it's okay if you fail. We have to be okay with failure and understand where it comes from, and then learn from those mistakes and learn from those failures so that we can, do better the next time. And, I always think about babies, when they fall and they're learning how to walk, they always get back up,
Right.
And eventually they learn how to stay up. And I think that's the idea. So.
Yeah. And absolute thinking is also correlated with emotional distress, and
Of course.
Particularly anger, because when people are confronted by situations that don't conform to their demands, in terms of what ought to happen in the situation or what ought to be, the way things ought to be, anger is a very fairly common emotion, can be primary and secondary as an emotion. It comes up a lot when things don't conform to the way the things ought to be, because you have this rule about the way things should go, and when they don't go that way, you become frustrated. So it's correlated to stress at work, having an unpleasant experience about your work or about your relationships. You perceive yourself to be less effective at managing your emotions and at directing yourself through problems and situations. So you sort of look externally for answers when things are absolutist in your mind. You want them to take care of it. You want this to be this way, or otherwise this and this and this will happen. It's like you said, if we don't, if you had a fear about the stock market, you might start to think, well, if they don't regulate the stock market properly, then it's not safe for people to invest, as opposed to that's the way it goes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes the research that you'll do will end up being correct and effective, and sometimes the research that you do will end up being misinformed, or just, even the experts don't always know. So it's being able to dance with that kind of, that kind of rhythm. And, people, it's also shown that people who have absolutist thinking actually have lower self-worth and lower self-esteem, create lower self-worth and lower self-esteem in themselves, because they don't think they have the self-agency. Like I said, they look outward to have other people manage things for them, or get things managed in a certain way, or they become very controlling about it being done this way and this way only, otherwise XYZ could happen, and that causes a lot of distress. It causes distress in relationships, and it burns people out. It burns you out. And basically it's also shown, there's studies on this, that it actually is less effective in problem solving to be absolutist in your way of thinking. Opening up yourself to all possibilities, on both polar sides, in between, just gives you not only a lot of freedom to choose, but more self-autonomy, rather than going to one or the other. And the kick is, it's kind of like you just did with the stock market, or you had done with the stock market, or I did with the plumbing. It's realizing that you're doing that. It's realizing that your life is going in that way because you've made a decision about something. And, because there's a distress that happens sometimes when people don't think in their absolutist way. They don't stay with their camp, so to speak, whatever they've chosen. There's a distress about thinking differently at first. It's uncomfortable to challenge yourself and say, wait a second, how do I know that that's the way it is? Maybe it could be some other way. Maybe that stain on the wall is not actually as big as I think it is, or maybe the stock market is not a dangerous place to be, or maybe those people over there have a point. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. What if I was them? How would I be seeing the world? You could also ask yourself that. If you have a group of people that think very differently from you, with our country right now, we never see that, right? Yeah. So if we happen to take a look, ask yourself, if I was them, if I were them, and I'm not talking about, hate groups and very extremists. I'm talking about, in the middle. If I was them, how would I see the problem? How would I look through their lens? What is their lens? Where are they coming from? How are they processing the same information that I'm processing, and how are they processing it differently? It really boils down to having empathy, both for yourself and for other people. If you're thinking absolutist, you shut off empathy and you say, if you're not thinking the way I am, you're a threat to me. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, because other people, can see things through a different lens, through a different filter. You may not have the same filter, and you may not agree with their filter, but just have some empathy for how somebody else sees it. Get into their world so that you can let them into yours. You know what I'm saying? And then we wouldn't look externally for the answers. We wouldn't look, only to our leadership for the answers, because we are the leadership. We're the people. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying mutiny. I'm just saying we have power. We have greater numbers, and greater influence, because the external will respond to us. When we fix ourselves internally, the external will respond to you. It has to. Your world will align itself or realign itself based on how you're changing yourself inside. So I think that's an important component about absolutist thinking in an abstract kind of a way.
I agree. I think also another thing that I've noticed with people is a lot of people tend to compare themselves to other people. And again, they go to the absolutes where, I'm not good enough because this person is so much better than I am. And they don't see the good in themselves. And, with social media nowadays, it's so much harder to feel okay with yourself when you see all these people that are taking pictures in, amazing places, or, that looks so beautiful. And then, most people tend to feel less because of that, because they're, subconsciously comparing themselves to other people constantly. Do I have the same car? Do I have this or that? And then, it causes a lot of other issues in our minds when we think this way. But if we tend to, do less of that and do more where we focus on ourselves and try to improve ourselves and compare ourselves to ourselves and be like, okay, last week I was this much, now this week I'm going to improve at least 1%. If it's just a tiny bit, we improve one tiny thing in our life, then eventually, that 1% becomes 2% and 3% and then so forth. But, we got to start somewhere and start, breaking that pattern of, absolute thinking where we think either black or white. There's multiple shades in between black and white. And, the idea is to move forward in life, to move from one place where we feel like we're a complete failure into something where we can feel a little bit more successful every day, little by little. And that's how you become successful over time. If you start to, even like with going back to the example with YouTube, you start your YouTube channel and you have one person that watches your video. That's something. You've already succeeded with one person. And even if you have a one person audience and you do an amazing job at whatever you're trying to teach them or show them, then that one person eventually will maybe become two. And then that's, you've just doubled your audience and then you just keep doing it until eventually you double that. And that would be 4 people. That's, pretty good number when you first started with 1. But that's the thing. The problem with most people is they start one video and then they want millions of followers right away. And that's not how it happens. You got to start somewhere and start to grow from there. And, keep your standards low at the beginning, yes. And, who knows? Maybe you'll have great success right away. You don't know that. But the idea is to try it, to go out there, to break yourself and to do more of the things you love so that you can eventually do more of that. Same with relationships. You've had one relationship that was bad and that maybe, made you feel like you didn't want any more relationships in your life because you had a bad one, and you tried to generalize that feeling or that thought to every single person on this planet. That's not the case. Every single person is different. And that's the thing we need to learn and to, process in our mind, that, be in the moment, be in the present, let go of the past. Now, the things that you failed at, yes, maybe you failed many times. Learn from it. I'm not saying to forget about it completely, but learn from those things so that you can focus on the now and then try again, until you eventually get to where you need to be or where you want to be. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people making decisions, rash decisions or quick decisions, when they're either doing a project or trying to find a solution to something in life. And I've witnessed a lot and observed a lot people omitting a certain alternative to a situation very quickly, saying, "Oh no, because this and this, boom, that choice is out." So all the other alternatives which compose the gray area of a situation or an interpretation of something get omitted and removed from the equation very, very quickly. And this comes from black and white thinking, or the premise of black and white thinking. They actually call this the black and white fallacy. And it occurs in arguments where what they call, this is kind of fancy, they call it a disjunctive premise. That means that there's the different alternatives, many different alternatives for a solution to an issue, but certain alternatives get omitted very quickly or dismissed very quickly. And it happens because of absolutist thinking. There's a certain paradigm that we're thinking through, and certain things get bounced off of you too quickly. And I see this all the time. I observe it all the time. When I think something is a really good idea or something to explore, and somebody just dismisses it really quickly because they have, like you said, a YouTube situation or a stock market situation, and they think they know in an absolutist way that that's not going to work, or that's not a plausible alternative because of past experiences or past traumas. And it gets omitted really, really quickly. And after you omit a few of them, you have one or the other. You have black and white. So our mind, sort of chisels ourselves down to black and white very, very quickly. And if we stop for a moment and take a look at all the alternatives that were being thrown at us and catch ourselves omitting it too quickly, that can give us a little bit of insight as to how fast we omit something. And understand that underneath all of this, there's a fear. Fear is a very primary emotion. And because of past traumas or past hurts, we have a fear of repeating that hurt. So the fear is there, a fear of losing control, the fear of being inadequate, the fear of rejection, the fear of loss. There's always a fear underneath our unwillingness to consider other alternatives that we omit really, really quickly because we don't want to be hurt again. But like you said, just because you had one failure, or just because, only one person listened to your video, that doesn't mean it's a failure. That means, there's something to look at in terms of feedback, but that doesn't mean, all the other alternatives should be omitted, that you shouldn't do a second one, or that you shouldn't invest again, or that, it doesn't mean those things. So I think that's important to remember also, and just be aware of your fear, because fear is very primal. It's used a lot in trying to get us to choose in an absolutist kind of a way. A lot of the times you're only given two alternatives, chocolate or vanilla, or left or right. How many choices do we really have? I know in the political game, people have often said, well, how come we don't have 10 people to choose from or 12 people to choose from? And I know right away, people who are listening to me saying, oh, because this. They all have an absolutist way of answering me, because we've tried that before, because other countries have done that before, because that's exactly what I mean. You're omitting all the possible alternatives really, really quickly because you're sure that you know. But do you really? Do you really know? And how do you know? How do you know that you know? How do you know that you know? It's just, I'm not saying I'm right with that. I'm just saying that's the question to ask yourself. How do you know that you know? How do you know that you're so certain about that? What makes you so certain about that? Ask yourself that and challenge yourself. Challenge yourself, and you might see a lot of other alternatives pop up again. Be
Mm-hmm.
reborn, a rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that nobody's perfect. We all have, some parts of ourselves that needs to work on, but we also have really good things. For example, if somebody's anxious, they have anxiety, they might feel anxious all the time. But the truth is, there's been times when they were not anxious, and so it's easier to focus on being anxious and say, oh yeah, I suffer from anxiety and I have all this, anxiety issues, blah, blah, blah. But if we start to think, okay, there's been times when it wasn't anxious, and you focus more on those things, then you realize that you have the ability to go back to the times when you were not anxious and to feel comfortable again and be okay with yourself. There's also times when we've all had those times when we loved ourselves and we loved, we felt really confident. And there's been times as well where we feel like a failure completely. But try to see if we can focus more on the positive things and realize that we're still, no matter how amazing we are, we still have that one part that's going to be, not as great, but that's okay. We all have that. Not, there's not one single person or human being on this planet who has not experienced failure or who has not experienced happiness at some point in their lives. We all have that. And this is part of life. There's all these different colors and different, perspectives and different ways of thinking. And there are people who think differently than you are, and that believe things that are different than what you believe in, and that's totally okay. That's what makes life so great, that there's all this different flavors in life and tastes and things that we can try, and the smells and different things to see and experience in life. And I feel like that's what makes life so great and so amazing. So don't, stop putting yourself in these boxes and try to break out of those boxes and go out there and experience new things every day. And I feel like that's what makes life much better and could make your life better if you try those things. So what do you think, Neil?
I absolutely agree. It could work both ways as well. I don't want to be absolutist about absolutist thinking. So it's not just about considering other alternatives. It's also taking a look at all the alternatives that you've been doing as a habit, consistently throughout your life. So in other words, the way your modus operandi, how you've been doing XYZ, or how you've been approaching something, in your life. You could take a look at the way you've been doing it and say, you know what, I don't think that's a feasible alternative for me anymore. That's really not the way I want to do it. I want to adjust that a little bit. I want to change that up a little bit. I want to, focus on something different, or I want to eliminate that or decrease that or increase that. So it's not just a question of seeing other alternatives that you've been omitting, but it's looking at the alternatives that you've chosen, that you've stuck by, and that it's kind of like brushing your teeth in the morning, is you just do it. Right. So what other things? I mean, please do brush your teeth. Continue to do that. But look at other things that you do, that you just do, right? That you just do. They're habitual. You don't even recognize that you're doing them, and ask yourself, wait a second, is that working for me? Or it's just like, it's like putting on clothes in the morning to me. That's how natural that reaction is, or that behavior is, or that alternative is, or that MO is for me. Is that working for me? Do I want to adjust that a little bit? So that's also a part of absolutist thinking, what you're already doing, or what you've been doing. Perhaps there's an adjustment you want to make there. And again, it's the hardest thing in the world sometimes to see ourselves through our own lens, because I quote this a lot, the Albert Einstein's quote about you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. When you have a paradigm that you're looking through, it's hard for you to see your own paradigm. That's why sometimes getting a third party perspective is could be important, but just that's why it's important to really stop, breathe, and look in and ask yourself, are all of my MOs really working for me? And how do I know they're really working for me? So I think that's also an important icing on the cake, so to speak,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Always go inside and try to see where you're standing and work from that. I think it's important to grow every day in some aspect, and there's definitely a lot of work to do with ourselves. There's no, I have that idea that I feel like you can always improve no matter where you're at, and I feel like it's important to, again, compare yourself to yourself. Try to make a better self, a better version of yourself every day, so that, if you improve even a tiny bit every day, eventually, it adds up and you have a huge, change in your life. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is to help you get there. So any last words before we finish this podcast today?
I again just get in touch with yourself, do a little bit of introspection. There's plenty of time for that right now, and go over all of when we talk about the old normal versus the relative new normal, make that an internal project. What have I been doing in the past that perhaps I want to alter? What have I not been considering that maybe I want to consider? And see the opening up, the stage 3 and 4, so to speak, at least in the state of California, as an opportunity for, wow, okay, like I said, the reset button has been pressed. Now I could really take a look at this as I go back into my life and as it was before. And it's kind of exciting. So it can be a little scary, but also a little exciting. So have fun with it.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening. And remember, we're here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. We also encourage you to subscribe to our channel. I think you can do it on YouTube or on whatever platform you use. You can just subscribe to it either on Apple Podcast, on Anchor, or Spotify, so that you can start following us and get more of updates whenever we have this podcast on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. And please continue to send us your questions, your comments. We absolutely love hearing from you. We've had some really, really good comments lately. Thank you so much for everyone for listening again, and all the people that are donating. I really appreciate that. Even if it's a little bit, we really appreciate it, because that's what makes us want to come back and do this every week. We just love that love from you guys. So thank you. And we will see you next week. Thanks, Neil.
All right. Thanks. See you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right.
This podcast is brought to you by MindFit. Please help us to share this podcast with your friends and family to grow this community. And if you'd like to donate to this podcast, or if you'd like to share your comments, questions, or concerns, send them to mindfitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call us directly at 714-328-4661.